Let's now move on to one of the most popular segments in show history, In the News, with Jim Cornette, the host of In the News. I believe he is on the line right now. Am I correct in this assessment?
Well, of course you are correct in this assessment. I've been with you the whole fucking time.
Well, the way this works is we go through classic wrestling newspaper articles revealing lost stories that time has forgotten, wild stories.
Lost, forgotten, obscure.
Various personalities. Some of this comes from the research that Scott Teal has done with the Crowbar Press Archives. Some of this actually this week comes from research that I have done. And let's get going with our very first... Me! This first story comes from the Courier-Journal, Louisville, Kentucky, July 15th, 1965.
Wrestler Valentine faces 3 charges. All things are as they were then, except you are there. Oh, that's the wrong program. Anyway, the trial of Johnny Valentine, 36, a 240-pound wrestler arrested Tuesday night at Convention Center, was continued to August 30 yesterday in police court. Police Sergeant Tom Denton said Valentine became violent after the wrestler and his opponent, Gene Kiniski, were disqualified in their match. Valentine was charged with being drunk in a public place, disorderly conduct, and assault and battery. So it doesn't look good for Johnny being arrested for being drunk in public immediately after his match, does it?
No, not too good. Who's running in Louisville in 65?
That was the last year that I think pretty much that Bruiser, before he gave up, because Kiniski was working the Midwest at the time for Bruiser. So was Valentine. And that was one of the intermittent. This may have been another one of those things that just led to Bruiser saying, fuck it, fuck Louisville. I had not heard of this incident until this point in time because it's been forgotten. It was lost. It's obscure.
Bruiser's style of wrestling is so different than the Memphis style, the Jarrett style, whatever you want to call it. How did it get over for those years where Bruiser was running Louisville?
Well, it didn't because he quit. Remember, that's the thing. It only lasted a year.
It was only a year. Wow.
Well, because he got the territory in 64, right? Barnett had been the local promotion. Louisville always did best, and traditionally up until the modern time, up until now, always did best when there was a strong local promotion. And thanks to the research that John Cosper has done, through the 30s, 40s, and into the 50s, it was the Allen Athletic Club, Haywood Allen. And then later on, his assistant in command took over when he passed away, Francis McDonough. But finally... And his wife, yes. But then what was it? He got out of the business in, 55-ish, 56-ish, right after all those big crowds that they drew, bringing in Baron Leone and Luthez and the TV stars and doing the Derby Eve shows and everything. The 50s, they had some big crowds. And then when he retired for a brief period of time, it was announced in Ring Magazine that Wee Willie Davis had gotten a wrestling promoter's license in Louisville and was going to open back up. Apparently that did not happen, but instead Louisville became part of the big Midwest territory that Barnett was running. And it was along with Indianapolis and Chicago. And so it was more grouped into a Midwest rather than as a Southern Territory city. When Barnett left and went to Australia in 64, Bruiser got Indiana, and along with it came Louisville, and the Sheik got Michigan and Ohio. And then the Bruiser and Gagne split Chicago. But the point is, this was July of 65. Pretty much after that, we've tried to, research, but you can't find. Every once in a while, you'll find mention in 65 and that area of an intermittent wrestling card, and usually they were like a girls' match, a preliminary match, and a tag match, or maybe 4 matches with 2 singles on top. They were small cards. The business was not doing well. And then by around this time, and maybe they got Valentine gets drunk and pops a cop, and they just said, fuck it. And the town was mostly dark. I've looked through old TV guide listings, and I can see that occasionally either wrestling from Chicago or just wrestling was listed in the late 60s, but it doesn't seem like they were running. So anyway, and then Jarrett, that's when he opened up in 70, when he found out from Nick and Roy that there was a band of towns, Evansville, Louisville, Lexington, that was dark.
And that's when Bruiser found out someone was running Louisville. And he said, hey, guys, what about me?
Well, no, he waited until they were making money first.
You see? Well, you know what? Let's stay on the topic of the Bruiser and his promotion. Let's go to this column. This is from Chicago. It was syndicated. This I pulled from the Kingsport, Tennessee newspaper, February 5th, 1975.
But I will add this. This is Bob Green's American Scene column, which I used to read in the Louisville Times, the afternoon paper, but he was based out of Chicago. So this is probably the reason for this coverage. Shots in the crowd. Chicago, when I heard that 5 wrestling fans had been shot by a gunman during the matches at the International Amphitheater here over the weekend, I must admit that my first thoughts did not go to the victims. Rather, I found myself trying to guess what the reaction would be from Bob Luce, the famous TV wrestling show host. Luce, who speaks exclusively in a terrible yowl and reacts to the sight of bloodshed and violence much as a hungry pup reacts to raw steak, was the impresario of the ill-fated Saturday Night Wrestling card. So I called Luce on Monday and made arrangements to meet him at the Executive House bar. His period of mourning seemed to be over. At the appointed hour, Luce was waiting for me, working on a glass of tomato juice and wearing a red plaid sports coat, yellow and white striped tie, and an orange, brown, blue, and yellow floral patterned, or yellow and white striped shirt, and an orange, brown, blue, and yellow floral patterned tie. His shriek, while toned down perhaps a decibel or two from the volume utilized on his television show, was nevertheless the loudest noise in the bar room. He was kneeing the underside of the table, always a sure sign that he is ready to talk. He needed little prompting to begin his soliloquy. It was a black male from 38 to 40 from what the lieutenant of police told me, Luce said. He was firing from the balcony. He was shooting at the ring. He was trying to shoot the referee. He fired 2 shots. One went through a boy's neck. Then it grazed a woman's neck. Then it ricocheted off the ring. It hit a boy's arm. The second hit a woman's finger. She was waving. Then it lodged in a woman's chest. The people who were hit, 3 white, 1 Spanish, 1 black. I get a very good cross-section.
It's a heck of a way to look at it from Bob Luce.
I asked Luce if he thought that the shooting incident would keep fans away from his wrestling cards. Even the shooter wasn't taking it out on his fellow fans, Luce said. He hit the fans by mistake. He was aiming at the ring. He was trying to hit the referee. There's another card February 7th. The Ox against the Bruiser. Heenan is back in a tag match. The fringe fan may be deterred, not the fan who wants to go. A car goes off the track and kills 14. He's back the next race. The wrestling fan is a pretty hardy fan. The Bruiser has no fear.
Yeah, don't worry. He's not trying to shoot you. He's trying to shoot the ring. Don't worry. Is this a big famous story? What do you know about this story, Jim?
This was the Bockwinkel and Vern. Heenan was at ringside. This guy apparently just went crazy with whatever that Bockwinkel or Heenan were perpetrating on Vern Gagne, and he was up in the bleachers or the higher riser seats, whatever the fuck. It was the International Amphitheater. And he shoots down at the ring. And when Bobby told me about this, because I asked him about it, he said when he heard the first pop and he realized it, said he saw it because the guy shot through the ring. He missed everybody in the fucking ring and missed Bobby on the floor. And he was hitting all those people on the other side. So Bobby would hear the first pop and he saw some shit happen on the other side. He just ducked under the ring. But fucking Bachboy, apparently they all rolled out, and the guy, in the time it took him to fire the fucking 2 or 3 shots or whatever the fuck he fired, or 5, everybody was out of the ring and underneath the ring and stayed there until they figured it out. But yes, there have been people shot at before in wrestling, but they never hit. That's the same thing as a good guy with a gun is going to stop the bad guy with the gun, right? The bad guy with the gun can't hit the people he's shooting at to begin with. What makes you think the good guy's going to? They shot at Ron Wright one night, but it was a guy on the floor shooting up at him in the ring and missed him, and they found the bullet holes. The people were up in the bleachers, right? And like a foot above the head level of the people sitting in the back row of bleachers, the fucking bullets lodged.
Wow.
So, and at least they didn't have AK-47s back there, or AR-15s, or whatever the fuck they are.
Well, imagine if the tragedies today with gun violence happened and you had Bob Luce on TV. I mean, you read that like Bob Luce, but it's impossible not to because the quotes, the sound bites, they're Bob Luce quotes. They're really the way he talked.
Yes, that was exactly the way he talked. Except I wasn't yelling quite as loud, and I don't have that fucking Midwest accent. Ah, bloodshed. It's going to be wild, folks.
Tell him, Bobo.
Yeah. Tell him, Bobo. Right now, I got Moose Cholak Moose.
Nom, 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 nom. When he's eating the sandwich. All right, well, let's stay in Chicago. December 7th, 1946.
Wrestling promoter sues Sheldon Clark, Chicago Associated Press. Fred Kohler, a wrestling promoter, today filed a mandamus suit in circuit court against Sheldon Clark, chairman of the Illinois State Athletic Commission, demanding the right to hold wrestling contests and championships. Roy D. Keene and Fred W. Turk, members of the commission, also were named. The commission has ruled that wrestling bouts were not contests and required promoters to advertise them as exhibitions. Kohler, in his suit, declared it is arbitrary, unreasonable, and discriminatory for boxing promoters to hold championship matches while the wrestling group is denied the same right.
Was this a big battle in a lot of states, the whole idea of an exhibition? Obviously on WWF television, for many years, they said it was an exhibition at the very beginning. Was this a big deal with the Athletic Commission in a lot of states?
No, just in the big one. New York was always a pissy athletic commission and always was fucking with wrestling because they were hoity-toity. And obviously, Fred Kohler won this one because they had plenty of championship matches in Chicago over the next 15 years, including Rogers and O'Connor. But, it was really most of the time you had promoters had problems with the athletic commissions over fees and fucking restrictions, or a guy gets out of hand and the commission wants to fine him or suspend him, but he's figured in, and all that stuff. But in I guess the first time I'd heard of it in Illinois, but also in New York, they would say, it has to be an exhibition, you can't call this a contest. And I think that was basically in the Northeast and maybe here as we see in Chicago. But they lost that one and they made a lot of money off wrestling. Think about this. I don't know how healthy the Chicago wrestling business was in the mid-40s. But since Fred Kohler was just at that point just getting started, right? He made millions over the next 15 years. And the state of Illinois got a huge chunk of money off of wrestling. So it was probably, once that he got going and was doing business, it was more in their best interest to fucking make sure that wrestling was healthy instead of fucking with it.
Well, Fred Kohler certainly did make a lot of money, and let's talk about that. Let's continue with Chicago. From the Chicago Tribune, December 18th, 1960.
Dollars rain on wrestling promoter. Professional wrestling made a comeback in 1960, which exceeded the fondest hopes of National Wrestling Alliance members in 25 United States areas and Canada and Mexico. Renewal of contracts for television exposure at the bouts, both live and taped, help in this upsurge of the greatest show in the ring, to use the words of Chicago's Fred Kohler. Kohler, who at 57 is observing his 31st year as a mat promoter, hasn't had it so good since 1957 when he lost his $50,000 per year TV time. Money has been rolling in at box offices throughout the NWA empire, of which Kohler is a member in good standing, with promotional rights in Illinois, Wisconsin, and Indiana. At 13 major shows this year in Chicago alone, Kohler drew crowds totaling a record 156,543. 10 indoors in the amphitheater and the stockyards, and 3 outdoors in White Sox Park. Gate receipts grossed $495,731, giving the Illinois Athletic Commission $49,000 in revenue. The year's largest attendance was realized at the first open-air card in Comiskey Park, home of the White Sox, July 29, when 30,275 contributed to a record $89,675 to watch the performance of such mat stalwarts as Pat O'Connor and Yukon Eric. Kohler, who as a result was awarded a trophy as the Wrestling Promoter of the Year, credits revival of interest to the weekly presentation of taped film shows in Bridgeport, Connecticut on national TV.
Now, hold on, Jim. Let me stop you right there before we continue with this, because there's some interesting information in there. Specifically, the gate receipts for $495,731. That's certainly what he reported, because if it says that he paid $49,000 to the Athletic Commission,
yes,
there's the 10%.
Yes.
What do you think of these numbers that you're hearing?
And that's another reason why that the Illinois Commission has always been looked down on, because they took 10%, which is like twice as much as every other commission. So promoters never liked the Illinois Commission for that. 13 shows totaling 156,000 people. Now, you had a couple of outdoor shows to skew that average, but that pretty much tells me that he sold out the amphitheater 10 times and did a couple of bigger crowds at the ballpark.
You know, the other interesting thing is just pointing out that this is the best year he had since 57, where he lost his TV deal, or his national TV deal, I guess. So that's pretty interesting. The fact that this is 60, you know, the big Buddy Rogers match is about to happen right around the corner. He's really getting heated up again. And then he's about to lose everything within just a few years. Jack Pfeffer and then Bruiser and Gagne take over, and Snyder.
Yeah, but the $50,000 TV contract was what he got for the network show from the network, right? So that was that contract, but he was still showing television programs in Chicago to promote his events, but he's using the tapes from Bridgeport, apparently.
Well, actually, let's pick up the story right there. Because
one more thing. If he grossed $495, let's say $500,000 for wrestling in Chicago in 1960, that would be easily $3 million in today's money. Somebody can do the math, in one city for 13 shows.
And he ran a lot more than those 13 shows in that city.
Oh, well, yeah, that's just the big ones.
Yeah.
That's not counting the Marigold Arena and all the little, spot shows and subsidiaries. But anyway.
Let's get back to the story. We go back into a little bit more about the TV.
Kohler paid $2,000 monthly to the sponsors for the right to exploit the programs in the Chicago area. In addition, he obtained the services of featured wrestlers performing on the Bridgeport shows, including such villains as Johnny Valentine and the Fabulous Kangaroos, Al Costello and Roy Heffernan. Another factor was appearance on the Chicago mat scene of another group headed by Eddie Quinn, veteran Boston and Montreal promoter. Quinn collaborated with James D. Norris, owner of Chicago Stadium, in the presentation of a new series of cards in the stadium. Quinn worked out a deal to stage a 1-hour show from a Chicago video studio each Saturday afternoon. These programs were used as a showcase for the cards offered without TV in the stadium. As soon as Kohler heard of the plan, he attempted to buy commercial time on the Saturday program, but without success. When station WNBQ began televising that taped show from Bridgeport, Fred bought in. He purchased the half hour starting at midnight. The Quinn-Norris operation in the stadium was discontinued in August, but Kohler continued on with unabated success. His explanation that TV exposure is chief factor in the mat games revival may sound odd to fight fans who are convinced their sport was killed by the cathode tube. However, mat promoters, like wrestlers, learn to cooperate with a potential opponent.
Well, let me stop you there again before we go to the last part of this article. I didn't know too much about the Eddie Quinn attempt to take over Chicago here in 1960. Did you know a lot about it?
Well, no, as a matter of fact, and it didn't last long, apparently. What did it say? Did he say how long he lasted? It was discontinued in August. It didn't say exactly when it started, but it was a short-lived deal. But that probably explains why that Fred Kohler went to the Capital Wrestling Group in the Northeast and Vince Sr. and said, hey, send me your talent, your shows on here, and we'll work together.
Dumont paid him $50,000 a year. Now he's paying $24,000 a year to sponsor the Bridgeport show. So it's an interesting change of turn of events there. But
yes.
Let's get back to this last column here in this article, because he has a new star in Chicago.
Bearcat Wright was Kohler's biggest gate attraction during the year. He made 10 appearances in Chicago, including participation in 3 Australian tag team matches with Sweet Daddy Siki as his partner. He also appeared against Buddy Rogers on that $89,000 card in Comiskey Park. Kohler's 1960 outdoor finale, September 16th, saw him perform a masterstroke when he signed Walter Killer Kowalski, member of rival Quinn's stable, for a featured event against Wright. Kowalski had been built up as a bad boy. Consequently, the Clash pulled 26,731 fans through the turnstiles. Receipts were $81,549, second only to the July 29 high of $89,000. Thus, Wright in 1961 may be given the opportunity to become the first Negro to gain NWA recognition as World Heavyweight Champion. Pat O'Connor retained these laurels during 1960, while Rogers is heralded as United States holder of the crown. Danny Hodge of Tulsa, Oklahoma, is recognized as junior heavyweight title holder.
See, there's something really interesting, because when we talk about Bearcat Wright, especially when we look at his Hall of Fame credentials and what he did, you forget just how important and how big he was for a brief period of time in Chicago. He's all over the Wrestling Life magazine. He was a major star, and it wasn't just Pat O'Connor and Buddy Rogers that drew a big house at an outdoor stadium in Chicago during this era. They were running these big stadium shows all the time.
Yeah, and Bearcat Wright at the same time, he was huge in the Northeast off that TV show. He was big in Washington and Baltimore, and that's why he got that opportunity in Los Angeles, which was a huge money territory in the early 60s, to be the champion there, and then the famous incidents with Blassie and etc. But he was one of the bigger box office attractions in the business for several years, and probably why that he didn't want to do a job, and probably why then once he got the reputation that he wouldn't do a job, that he quickly was not one of the biggest box office attractions.
Do you vote for him for the Hall of Fame, for the Observer Hall of Fame?
Boy, once again, if Bobo Brazil is in, as groundbreaking as he was, Bearcat Wright was a bigger gate attraction than Bobo ever was for a short period of time. Bobo lasted a whole lot longer. You maybe now have to, especially looking at this.
Well, let's continue on from here. We'll continue our evaluation of Bearcat Wright in the future, but let's go to a story from 1987. We've talked a lot about this on the Jim Cornette Drive-Thru, where fans get involved and sometimes get maybe hit or pushed or who knows what happens, but it happened here, 1987, with the AWA.
Fan awarded $12,500 after wrestler bops him with belt. Sorehead professional wrestler Buddy the Playboy Rose was so mad when he lost a match that he conked a fan on the head with a 30-pound belt buckle, and it's going to cost him $12,500. A Denver, Colorado judge awarded the money to family man Steve Ingleton after the burly 275-pound wrestler didn't respond to his damage suit. It was a dumb thing for him to do, and I damn sure wasn't going to let him get away with it, said Ingleton, who is 100 pounds lighter than Rose. Ingleton, an ex-Marine, was sitting in the third row with his wife when the hulking wrestler stormed out of the ring after losing a match. We had eyeball-to-eyeball contact, said Ingleton. I was just grinning at Buddy Rose, thinking to myself, what a maggot that guy is. Without any warning at all, Ingleton said the massive wrestler whirled around and whacked him on top of his head with the 30-pound buckle of the World Wrestling Federation's Tag Team Championship belt. I got to tell you the truth, I saw quite a few stars, said Ingleton. My head was spinning like a blender. He blindsided me, and it was a good lick. I never knew what hit me until later. You take a 275-pound guy swinging a 30-pound belt, it puts the hurt on you. He conked me real good. Blood was everywhere, down the front and back of my clothes, he said. I tried to go after him, but I was dizzy and felt faint. Ingleton said Rose gave him the finger and cursed at him as he was escorted out of the wrestling arena for medical attention. 5 stitches were necessary to close the head cut. Ingleton said he missed 3 days' work and had throbbing headaches for about 2 months. Ingleton stopped going to wrestling matches for 7 months. I couldn't stay away any longer because I love the game, but I don't sit near the ring. I saw Rose wrestle several times after that, and it did my heart good every time I saw him get creamed.
Well, there you hear it, the usual story of fan minding his own business when the heel wrestler just decides to wallop him for no good reason. Out of nowhere.
Cinderella story, out of nowhere.
He was just thinking what a maggot he was. He didn't actually do anything or say anything. But Jim, the idea that a wrestler would get hit with a lawsuit and just not respond, was that a frequent thing in the territory days and especially the 80s?
Oh God, yeah, you just leave the territory. See, that was why in some cases, if you saw a top guy suddenly leave, and it's seeming in the middle of things, it was either over money or he got a lawsuit. Because For one thing, the excuse here the guy had, I was just standing there and suddenly, well, that was the guy in Altoona. He was standing by the railing taking pictures when suddenly I ran over to him and began smashing him over the head with the tennis racket. Actually, he hopped the rail and had already tackled Bobby. But you can't say that. And, you know, in those days, especially if the promoter was pissed at you or didn't want to cover your attorney, you'd have to cover it on your own. And it was cheaper to just go get a fucking spot somewhere else than hire an attorney. And once you got out of the way, they can't find you. They don't know what your real name is. The office says, oh, geez, we paid him by money order, you know, or whatever at the post office box, whatever the fuck. You just leave the territory. That's why the Road Warriors came into existence when Matt Bourne and Arn Anderson were going to get the push as a heel tag team in Atlanta, and Matt Bourne got in trouble with the underage girl and just left the territory. If they won't come after you for an underage girl, I don't know that they'll come after you for whacking a guy over the head with a belt, especially when the cops probably saw what really happened.
Were there guys, though, that like in the 90s would return to a town and find out they had an outstanding warrant for the last 15 years?
No, because, well, you got a statute, as they say, of limitations. So, you know, every once in a while you go back if the heat was off. Sometimes you go back under a different gimmick. Nobody would know it was the same guy.
Well, Jim, for our next story, let's go to a rather lighthearted story. This is from the Clearwater Sun, Saturday, March 8th, 1996.
Golden Boy shares birthday with some kids. Clearwater. A big guy brought a lot of joy into the hearts of some little kids Friday afternoon. Golden Boy Chick Donovan celebrated his 39th birthday by giving his International World Wrestling Association Championship belt to the Chichi Rodriguez Foundation as 50 youngsters looked on with smiling, admiring eyes. An abused child once died in Donovan's huge arms when he was a paramedic in Texas. Since then, he has reached out to help troubled young people. Donovan apparently was moved when he learned of Chi-Chi's program, which enjoys tremendous success, turning around the lives of abused and troubled youths, said Bill Hayes, president and co-founder of the foundation. Donovan has told Hayes he wants to raise money to build a gymnasium to give youngsters like Chi-Chi's kids a place to work out. Take care of your body and your body will take care of your soul, Donovan told the kids after he played a round of golf with them at the Glen Oaks golf course. The kids were all excited about the belt, said Hayes. This guy's on TV wrestling. He's a hero to them. Donovan didn't go empty-handed on his birthday. The kids presented him with a big cake decked out with 39 candles.
So, 39. You know, it's funny, Jim. When I turned 39, my father called me up. And I answered the phone and said hello, and he said, Jack! I didn't know why he was saying Jack. I didn't know if he thought he called the wrong number, if he was drinking Jack. I didn't know what the story was.
Jack Benny!
I said, Dad, it's me. He goes, no, Jack Benny, you're 39.
Yeah.
So is that the deal with Chick Donovan? What are the chances he was 39 in 1996?
Actually, no, this is 1986.
Oh, this is 1986.
You have read this incorrectly, and I'm going to do this math. That was 33 years ago. That is correct. It was his 39th birthday because Chick Donovan, who I just saw in Charlotte, North Carolina at the gathering, told me he was 72.
All right, so actually this is accurate. I apologize to the Donovan family as well as Chi-Chi's kids for getting the wrong year on this. But
now, if it had been 1996, we'd have some issues there. He'd be shaven.
See, that's why I thought it was funny. I thought because everyone always talks about how Chick Donovan is so old and he still is, you know, Chick Donovan, if he actually took on the Jack Benny gimmick of he's always 39. I thought that's what made it really funny. But
actually, some people claim that Chick Donovan, under another name, wrestled Frank Gotch in 1905, and he's really some type of undead vampire.
Well, time will tell. But Jim, before we wrap up things this week here for the special episode 100 in the news, we have a special feature that you're going to be reading. It is an article by you entitled, The Road Warriors Are Finished.
The Road Warriors Are Finished by Jim Cornette. Photos by Paul Heyman. Editor's note, the views expressed in this article are those of famous wrestling manager Jim Cornette and do not necessarily reflect the views of this publication nor its editorial staff. It does, however, reflect the views of Paul Heyman, who wrote this entire article.
By the way, the editorial staff, Paul Heyman was, I believe, the editorial staff of this
yes.
Wrestling Power issue from 1987.
Yes. When the editors of this magazine approached me about doing a special feature for this issue, they thought they'd have to pay me a small fortune. After all, the viewpoints of wrestling's #1 manager can't come cheap. But just to show my appreciation for their good taste as to who they asked to do columns, they didn't ask Baby Doll or Paul Ellering now, did they? I decided to give them a break. So here I am, Jim Cornette, manager of the NWA World's Tag Team Champions, the Midnight Express. Jim Cornette, one of the finest physical specimens in the sports world today. Jim Cornette, the man with wrestling's indestructible bodyguard, Big Bubba Rogers. It's come to my attention that Paul Ellering's muscle-bound freaks, the Road Warriors, are coming after my tag team champions, Beautiful Bobby and Loverboy Dennis. The Road Warriors, who with their manager Paul Ellering, think they're so indestructible, so untouchable, so invulnerable, the very same warriors who were left on their backs by the Four Horsemen. The very same Road Warriors who were beaten to a bloody Paul Bevan and Nikita Koloff and Crusher Khrushchev. So let's throw out the theory that the Warriors are unbeatable, unstoppable, or invulnerable. He likes those words, don't he?
It does read like a Paul Heyman promo, I gotta say.
The Four Horsemen don't buy that, and they've got proof. And the Russians don't buy it, and they've got proof too. The Road Warriors have been so impressive on television, beating up guys like Randy Mulkey, haven't they? Well, I'd like to see them dominate a match against the Midnight Express. I can tell you now, ladies and gentlemen, they won't. And you know why? Because while the Warriors are indeed strong, they are not agile. Loverboy Dennis and Beautiful Bobby are strong wrestlers, maybe not exactly as strong as the Warriors, but they are agile. While the Warriors cannot work effectively within the rules, both Dennis and Bobby are fine scientific wrestlers who can also brawl with anyone, even the Warriors. The Warriors do possess good teamwork, I gotta give them that. But the Midnight Express has been around just as long as the Road Warriors, and we're the ones with the tag team belts, aren't we? The Warriors have only proven themselves in the old Georgia area and the AWA, and now they've come to the NWA. The Midnight Express has dominated such areas as Mid-South, UWF, and World Class, and has humiliated such names as the Fantastics, the Rock and Roll Express, the PYTs, how did they... and not to mention Sunshine's entire army in Texas. And while we're on the subject of Sunshine, God damn, this is brutal. Don't you think one of the greatest moments in professional wrestling history was when I taught that Baby Doll a lesson? Huh? I mean, first of all, I don't even think Baby Doll's a woman. Maybe, just maybe, she's taking a few of those helpers that those Russian women take for the Olympics. Maybe, just maybe, her voice has been getting a little deeper. Baby Doll, I know, and the rest of the world knows that slowly but surely you're becoming a man. Did I mention I didn't write this? But let's not waste my valuable time talking about Baby Doll. Oh, good Lord. Or her out-of-shape master, Dusty Rhodes. Let's talk about a man who Dusty Rhodes used a lethal weapon against. Yes, let's talk about a man who took Dusty Rhodes' best shot and remained standing. I'm telling you, of course, about Big Bubba Rogers, my bodyguard. You know, when Mama sent Bubba down to watch my back for me, I had no idea just how unbelievable this man truly was. But then I saw Dusty Rhodes hit Bubba with a chair. ... A chair! And Bubba just stand there. And believe me when I tell you, should it be stood there?
It shouldn't be Bubba just stand there. I don't know why.
And believe me when I tell you, I had to almost beg Bubba to get out of the ring, even when Dusty and Magnum TA were swinging those big shovels. Bubba Rogers is not a man, he's a monster. After all, it only took one punch from Bubba to knock Baby Doll's pride and joy, the Warlord, out cold. And as for the Warlord, why has he chosen Baby Doll as his manager? What are her managerial capabilities? Can she negotiate a contract for the man? I doubt it. Can she personally supervise his training? I doubt it. What, therefore, can she do for him? Let me clarify this. Now, in order to figure this one out, maybe we should take a look at Baby Doll's background. She first appeared in Texas as Gino Hernandez's bodyguard. That's a joke to start with. Then this loyal bodyguard, the loyal and trustworthy employee of Gino Hernandez, ups and leaves him for his former tag team partner, Tully Blanchard, who is wrestling here in the NWA. Then she tries to start trouble between Tully and J.J. Dillon, a fine wrestling manager and business advisor, and she hooks up the dirtiest wrestler in the history of this great sport. And she hooks up the dirtiest wrestler in the history of this great sport, Dusty Rhodes. Wonder what she hooked him up with. Now, certainly wouldn't call Baby Doll a very stable person, would you? Of course not. And here's this warlord trying to make a career out of professional wrestling, and he turns to this unstable woman for guidance. One of the first things you learn to do as a manager is provide something stable for your wrestlers. There's certainly some shit from the stable here. What's Baby Doll providing for Warlord? Maybe she cleans his pots and pans. Maybe she waxes the kitchen floor when he's done tracking up the house with his muddy biker boots. I don't know, and quite frankly, I don't want to know. As far as I'm concerned, Baby Doll is just another woman who's trying to make a name for herself in a man's world, and she's going to learn the hard way what it's like to fail. Warlord is also going to learn a lesson. He's going to learn that it takes not only raw talent and ability, but good, steady guidance to further a career in this great sport. And as for the Road Warriors, the Midnight Express still holds the World's Tag Team Championship, and when Loverboy Dennis and Beautiful Bobby get finished with the Road Warriors, I'm going to send their makeup kit home to Mama to mount in my trophy display. After all, it's probably the greatest honor the Road Warriors will ever receive.
All right, Jim, this article from Wrestling Power, 1987. Obviously, Paul Heyman knows a lot about the different things you did in your career, but how do you rank this Jim Cornette fan fiction written by Paul Heyman?
That read like a goddamn witness statement to a fucking patrolman late at night somewhere. And another thing she did. What the fuck? I'm glad he's polished up his literary capabilities since then.
If you think about it, it is very ECW. You know, I'm feuding with Baby Doll. Baby Doll's like me. Oh, she's a man. You know, like all of a sudden there's that big turn there at the end.
Well, I just want everybody to know that I didn't say any of that stuff, so I cannot be held accountable for being transphobic or ogre-phobic or whatever the fuck it is.
That's right. Well, as we wrap up this episode of In the News, Jim, any closing words from you, the anchor of the In the News desk?
I'd just like to say that the next time you hear In the News, I will be on assignment. So if there's any more Heyman fucking publications here in the News segment next time. But thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for your support.